Ooh, just reset the energy, Lord. Allow me to be your vessel. Ashe, ashe. Ashe. All right. Welcome to the channel. I hope you enjoy my channel, my journey, and I hope it inspires you. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story and let you know how it is that I healed my body. So, hello everybody. Welcome to my channel. My name is torijae. For those of you that are returning, thank you. And let me just say, for those of you who have been following my journey, sending prayers, sending affirmations, and just showing support, thank you so much. So at the top of this year, back in January, me and my kids had a house fire. My kids are 4 and 6 years old, and we had a house fire, and we literally had to run out the door. We lost everything, and when I say everything, I mean everything. As in, we are starting from scratch. We are building our lives all over again. Um, well, obviously, we lost everything except our lives, right? By the grace of God, and we checked into a hotel the next morning after the fire, and I thought my period started. But because of the stress of the fire and everything going on, trying to figure out where me and my kids were going to be living and, just stress, I didn't realize that I had been bleeding for over 2 weeks until I was like out and just bleeding through my clothes, literally bleeding through my clothes. So at that point, I went to the hospital. They told me to follow up with an OB. And, I don't know if you know, but most of us know them OBs, they be booked. So a week goes by. I'm bleeding still and I'm pouring through my clothes. So I end up going back to the ER. And at that time, they said, you need to follow up with an OB. If your blood keeps dropping, you're going to need a blood transfusion. So I followed up with an OB, and they checked my paperwork from the doctors, and they basically said, let's look at the scans that the doctors did at the ER, and we'll do our own scans. And they said that they saw a polyp. They didn't see any fibroids. They didn't see any cysts. They felt like the polyp was causing the bleeding. So they wanted to get me in for surgery to have the polyp removed, and they didn't have an available appointment for a few months. Now, mind you, I am bleeding during this entire time, and I don't mean just like a little period blood or just a little spot. I mean, I am pouring out blood. I am passing large blood clots, and I'm wearing those overnight large pads. I'm wearing the pins underneath my pad, well, on top of my pads, and I'm just having to layer so many layers, right? Just to try to give myself some sort of protection because I had been bleeding through my clothes. So I think at what point was it? I think it was maybe a month or so later. Um, the OB at no point said, hey, maybe we should get your blood work checked to make sure you haven't lost too much blood. At no point did they say that. And I got to the point where I started taking my kids to the park, and we would go for walks, and, just that's just a part of like our routine. So we would go out or go for walks or something, and I would literally feel like I was about to faint. And it got to the point where even just talking was draining me. Even like trying to walk upstairs, I felt like I could fall over. So I was like, okay, let me call in my blood work. By the grace of God, I know how to call in my own blood work, and I know how to read my blood work as well. So had I not known how to do those things, I honestly don't know what would have happened. But so I called in my blood work, and I ended up going to a lab, getting the blood work done. And a few days later, even if you don't know how to read your blood work, there will be a doctor that will analyze and look for anything critical. So if you have something going on that's dangerous, they'll call you, they'll let you know, hey, get to an ER. And that's what they did. They called me and they said, hey, we're sending over your blood work now, but we wanted to let you know that your blood levels have dropped down to a 5. You need to get to an ER before you collapse. And I was like, oh my God, a 5. And if you're not familiar, your blood should be anywhere between 12 and 15. So a 5 means I'd lost over half the blood in my body. And again, my OB had not even asked, like, hey, have you gotten your blood work done? Hey, we want to check your levels. It's been a couple of months now. So I went to the ER, had a little bit of a panic attack before I got to the ER. But I went to the ER and they were like, oh my God, you're critical. We're going to go ahead and give you a couple of blood transfusions. At one point, they talked about having the surgery for the polyp, since that's what the OB said was causing the bleeding. They were like, yeah, we're going to just go ahead and have this surgery. And they end up not having this surgery because they felt like my blood levels being that low, that puts me in a more critical position in terms of survival, because in surgery anything could happen. You could bleed out or anything, and that is a risk to my life at that point. So they were like, well, no, it's too dangerous to do surgery right now. We have to at least get you stable, get your blood levels up. So they did the blood transfusion, sent me home. I went back to the OB for a follow-up, and I told them, I was like, hey, I was in the ER and I called in my blood work and it was so low, I needed blood transfusions. I am still pouring out blood. And they were like, oh my God, okay. So I happened to see my doctor. She got me on a schedule sooner to have the polyp removed, got the polyp removed, had surgery. And they said that when you're going to bleed a little bit, but when you stop, you should now start bleeding at some point again, and that should be your normal period. The bleeding never stopped. The bleeding never stopped. And then I heard about this young lady a couple of weeks after my surgery named Jessica Petway. And her story shook me, because she was this beautiful young lady. She'd been bleeding since last year. Very similar story. Except she was misdiagnosed. I believe she had cancer, and they just thought it was her fibroids. And in my case, my doctors never actually did an MRI to see if it was something deeper. They did do one biopsy, but they never checked an MRI just to try to see if there's something else going on that maybe they overlooked, right? And I think because of Black women and the womb issues that we have, it's gotten to the point where we're just so dismissed, so easily dismissed, right? It's like, oh, you guys have fibroids and cysts and polyps, and here, just take this pill, here, take this hormone, here, let's just take your womb out. It's just they're always trying to write us off or give us some sort of quick fix that actually doesn't fix anything. So her story shook me. And a little bit of history about me is I've been plant-based for a while now. I went plant-based before I had my children. My son is 6 years old. So I went plant-based a couple of years before I had him. And so they're completely plant-based, and they have been since they were born. And I've been studying like the body, biochemistry, learning how to read blood, studying herbs, herbalism. I've always had like this interest for studying the body and just understanding more about the body, right? Because I never knew, based on what we're taught, that the body could heal itself. And now I understand that the body is so powerful. God did not make an imperfect design, okay? So if we are giving the body what it needs, it absolutely can heal itself. But it's more than just what you're eating, and it's more than just taking like some random herb, right? There's a combination of things that play a role in the success of healing. I like to call it the art of healing, because there is an art to healing your body. There's an art to the balance that it takes, balancing out your stress, your nutrition, your sleep, like your spirituality, being grounded, and controlling your environment and your space. It really does take all of those things coming together to properly heal. And to be honest, it's more spiritual than it is physical. And And it takes a level of discipline, because there are times where it's really trying. It's really trying, and it really will test you when you are, you know, let's say you're cleansing your body out, and you a few weeks in, and you want to eat what you want to eat, or you're around family and friends celebrating, or you're stressed out, because we tend to revert backwards when we get stressed, or we just start to lose endurance. Like, we start off strong, like, oh, I'm gonna do this, and then after a while we start to get lazy and fall back. But it's in those moments where you have to hold yourself accountable, and it's in those moments where even if you do fall off, you have to put yourself back on track. But I said all that to say that by the grace of God, I already had a love for learning about healing in the body, and herbs, and just everything in that arena. And I decided, after the bleeding didn't stop, and after I heard about this young lady's story, that I needed to take matters into my own hands, right? But I had not dealt with something like hemorrhaging, just bleeding. Abnormal uterine bleeding is what they called it. And so if I'm being honest, it intimidated me. And I I also allowed my fear and anxiety to intimidate me. I allowed myself to forget who I was in the kingdom, forget that, God always has control over a situation. And I also, despite the studying and the research that I've done, I also allowed myself to be intimidated by, like, the doctors, just because I don't, okay, let me choose my words. I care about the titles, but only because I have a level of respect for people who study and who research and who want to further their education, especially if it's to benefit people, especially if it's to give back. But if you go into an industry like the health industry, right? If you want to work in the medical field, I believe that you have uh, a level of responsibility for the people that you are saying that you're going to help. You have a level of responsibility to further your research beyond school, beyond what you've been taught, and beyond what you've seen. There's so much data and research and so many studies available today that has taught us so much more about the body than we've ever known before. Once upon a time, women were told that they could smoke cigarettes while they're pregnant. Today, we know that that's not true, right? So I think that as a medical professional, or as anybody who is working with people, especially with something as serious as their health, you owe it to not only yourself, but to the people that you're working with, to the industry, to the lives and the quality of lives that people are going to have, to make sure that you are taking that extra step. And I get it, right? The medical industry is oversaturated. People are overworked. They're tired. And to be honest, they look, when they're done, they want to go home and spend time with their family. And I get it. But I still allowed their beliefs and their lack of understanding of the body and its ability to heal, their lack of understanding, um, and their lack of education about nutrition and the role that those things play in your health. I allowed all of that to penetrate my mind, and I was letting the titles get in the way, like, oh, well, this is what the doctor said. I started to realize that I didn't have many options according to the doctors. So it was either I could take out my womb, I could be on hormones or birth control forever, I could just bleed out, and God forbid, um, I could lose my life. And it got to the point where I was trying to figure out how to make arrangements for my kids, because honestly, I didn't know what was going to happen. So her story woke me up, and her story made me say, girl, remember who you are. Remember the research that you've done. Like, it's not by chance that you stumbled across these things and you take an interest in these things. This may be something that you've never dealt with, but it's more like a test. It was like a test from God, right? Like, well, you studied the body. You've been learning these things. Let's see what you've learned. Let's put it to the test, right? And by by the grace of God, let me tell you something. Um, I decided to go on a detox after the surgery and after the bleeding didn't stop. I decided to detox my body. I did that for a couple of months. My bleeding stopped. My bleeding stopped. And then I had my first period, or what I thought was my first period. And I was like, oh, I'm back in the game. And I started back eating whatever I wanted to eat, having me a little drink, if I go to dinner and just doing whatever it is that I was doing prior. And honestly, my body reverted right back. So what I thought was my period, like I said, turned out to be me bleeding again and again. And I called the OB back like, hey, you said my bleeding was going to stop after I had my first period. Well, this period has not stopped. And I went back to them. They decided to do another scan. They were like, oh, that's unusual. They prescribed me more hormones. I started bleeding through the hormones. And honestly, it got to the point where I had to go back to the ER and I had to get another blood transfusion. I ended up losing so much more blood. And I said, okay, the only time in this year, since January 2024, that I did not bleed was that short time that I detoxed my body. So let me see if that was really my body reacting to what I was doing. And I did. I did it again. I decided, okay, let me detox. But this time I was a little more strict with it. I went raw, right? I went raw most days. So 3 days I would eat raw, and then one day I would eat lightly sautéed or lightly roasted vegetables. But on those days I still had a lot of fruit, a lot of fruit. But it was 3 days raw, one day cooked food, 3 days raw, and that was my rotation, right? And I started to not only see a difference in my bleeding and my energy, but I also started to recognize how quickly it happened when I controlled my energy as well. So it got to the point where my bleeding did stop. And I can confidently say to you all today that I have now had a couple of normal periods. I'm not hemorrhaging anymore. I'm feeling better than I have felt all year, guys. I'm getting my energy back. I have lost some weight, but I'm still cute. I am here. I have life. I'm happy. I'm so grateful to God. My children have their mom. I have my babies, and we have so much to be thankful and grateful for. But I just want to say, when we are going through things, especially as it relates to our health, we don't realize how much stress or lack of sleep or these other things really affect it. Like, we say we know it, like, oh, stress can make your blood pressure go up, or oh, yeah, stress makes things bad. We say that, right? But then these bills start hitting us and we be stressing, or we lose a job and we be stressing. And we just allow situations to overpower us and our energy. But one thing I learned this year in going through this situation, because I was pouring out blood, I could physically see how that stress looked, right? So let's say I got angry or yelled or raised my voice, or I didn't even have to raise my voice. I could just be really irritated or have a lot of anxiety. When I tell you my body would pour out more blood, like literally I would be pouring out more blood. And I'd be like, oh my God. And it would freak me out because, again, I'd already gotten a couple of blood transfusions. So as soon as I was stressed or somebody would trigger me or something would happen, I would physically see the amount of blood I would lose. And I said, okay, I can't, this isn't going to work. And it got to the point where I'm like, not only am I going to have to change what I'm eating, but I'm going to have to control my entire environment. I'm going to have to control my emotions, people who are coming into my space. I'm going to have to control what triggers me, So I'm not watching the news and watching things that's stressing me out. I'm not watching anything that is going to be depressing or trigger anxiety in me. I'm not allowing people to come around that are triggering me. And if they are, or if there's a situation that I can't avoid, I am going to control my interactions with these people. I had to be so intentional about my energy. I mean, incorporating deep breathing, regular breathing exercises in my daily routine, meditation, getting to bed. Okay, I'm a person, you know how we do, moms, busy, chaotic life. It does not matter. If you are not here, it does not matter. If you don't have the health or the quality of life to be able to keep up with your kids or keep up with your life or show up to work, none of that matters if you're not here. Okay? So a lot of times we say, oh, I don't have the time, or we make all the excuses in the world. Until you get sat down, you don't realize how critical it is for you to control these things. So the best thing I did was change the food. Obviously, I was taking herbs specific to womb health and reproductive health in women. And this was all allowing me to balance out my hormones. It was allowing my body to detox and flush out toxins and impurities. And honestly, I still am. When you think about issues that develop in the body, these are things that take years to develop. And for some reason, people, you know, they don't necessarily believe in like holistic practices because one, you're not taught to. Okay, we're so far removed from the ways of the ancestors, and the doctors are not taught that either. So they tell you, well, you got diabetes, you got it forever. Oh, you got high blood pressure, this is, they tell us that we have certain issues and that is your life. And they've done such a great job marketing that. And to be honest, a lot of doctors actually believe that. And because they do such a great job at teaching us that that is the only way, we stop looking, we stop trying. And I realized that, there was a scripture that said, let the herbs be for your healing. And that is so powerful to me because between the herbs and the food and controlling my energy, controlling my peace, my body was able to regulate itself. And through my story and through my situation, I've met so many other women, and I've had so many women come to me and say, hey, I want you to help me on my journey as well. Help me to start my healing process. And obviously, it's something that before I work with anybody or even, try to guide anybody on that journey, I'm like, you have to be mentally prepared. This isn't a thing where you're like, oh, my New Year's resolution, I want to do it, but you think you're going to start it, but you don't. You really have to have your mindset prepared because you're talking about changing everything that you're doing, changing your perspective, changing the way you're looking at things. Even me and my kids losing our house early this year, right? It's so easy to look at that and say, oh, well, I don't have this and I lost this and I got to start from scratch. But it's like, I lost some things, right? But I gained so much wisdom and knowledge. Even just the understanding on how to heal from a situation is terrifying, is what I just went through. How to guide other women on their journeys. And not only that, learning the art of letting go of things that no longer serve me, letting go and just shedding everything. And I kind of feel like that's what I went through this year, from the house fire to the bleeding. It was just shedding of the old life, old habits, old patterns and behaviors, just shedding things that no longer served me on this part of my journey. And I had to go through that because it's one thing to read about something or study something, but it's another thing when you put what you've learned to practice and you actually work with somebody or you're healing and working on yourself. It's different to see real live results versus just saying you think you know something, right? So God definitely put me through a test, and it's given me a beautiful testimony. And not only am I grateful for this, but I'm grateful for my shift in perspective, because one of the first videos I put out after the fire, I said, praise God even in your storm. And at the time, it was so easy for me to focus on all the negative, but I didn't, because God was showing up through people. God was showing up through everybody, like the way people were supporting me and my children, showing up with food, showing up with clothes. I mean, people I did not know, people were showing me like God is here all around you. So if I knew that God was all around me, then I know that I'm not alone. I know that there's somewhere that I'm going. And I know that there's a bigger purpose in what it is that I'm going through. And if I could just keep my faith and continue to thank God every day. Thank you. Thank you for life. Thank you for waking me and my children up. I don't know what's going on with my body right now, but thank you. Thank you for healing in advance because I know you're going to get me through this. I have faith that you're going to get me through this. And even when I doubted myself, and even when I allowed myself to focus on the doctors or their titles or just the things that they were saying to me, or even this young lady, her story, even when I would run into these situations or what felt like obstacles or roadblocks, I had to remind myself at some point that God is with you. You see God around you. So try to sit still and pay attention to what it is that God is trying to teach you right now. What is it that God is trying to show you right now? What's the message in all of this? Because obviously it's something bigger. And most times when we're going through things, instead of focusing on the storm, that's the time when you need to sit down and pray. That's the time when you need to ask for clarity and guidance and stop trying to figure it all out. Sometimes the how doesn't matter. As long as you know what it is that you want and you know your heart is in the right place and you're giving God all the glory and praise and you're remaining faithful in your purpose, God will handle the rest. So it was a big lesson for me this year. It was a test of my faith, but my faith never wavered. I'll let you know that now. Um, Even if it was gone, my faith didn't have the opportunity to waver because every moment I felt heavy or I felt the weight of everything we were dealing with between the health and the house and clothes and just life. I'm like, oh, where are we going to stay now? And oh, here I go bleeding again. It's like, every time I felt the weight, something would happen. Somebody would show up, or I might get a message. Or even when I started sharing my story, people would send me a scripture or a message that would just fill me. And it would be so right on time. Or I would be driving in my car and I would see a rainbow. And you know, rainbows are a reminder of God's promise. So these things were constantly happening to remind me, and God was just saying, just stay where you are. It's okay. You may not see the full picture yet, but it's almost like walking through the shadow of the valley, right? It's dark and you don't know what's coming up ahead. I didn't know what was going to be on the other side, but I just knew I had to keep moving forward. I could not give up. And for me, in my situation, not giving up looked like leaning on the research that I've come into, right? Because although I may not be a doctor, like who am I, right? I mean, I'm a child of God, of course, but who am I? I'm just somebody who reads. And I believe when it comes to learning or being educated, all you need to do is be able to read and be able to comprehend what you're reading. If you can do those two things, you can learn to read studies and research papers written by doctors, and there's always new information being put out every day about the body and about food and about herbs and about breath work and about these different ways that we can heal ourselves and the different ways that we can relax ourselves or better our lives, right? And everybody's situation may not be about health. Somebody's situation or struggle might be about finances or relationships or, family dynamics or whatever it is that you're going through. You have to be faithful and you have to look for, what is the message in this? What am I supposed to learn from this? Is this something that's not serving me? Is it self-fulfilling prophecy? Am I doing this to myself? Right? Is it something outside of my control? Because if it's something outside of your control, baby, then you definitely can't stress about it. Right? Because the stress is going to trigger it and make it so much worse, and it's going to damage your health. Right? And when it comes to stress and energy, whatever energy you put out there, you get back. So it is critical when we are going through our storms to keep your energy positive and high. I know it's easier said than done, but let me tell you, it's possible. because I can tell you I have done it. It is possible. And I'm not saying you won't have a moment where you feel low. I'm not saying you won't have a moment where you want to drop down to your knees and cry, but make sure when you drop down and cry that you pray and that you say, thank you for bringing me out of this, and you claim it. And you claim it and you believe that it's going to be handled. Because if you are in that energy, I promise you, God will mirror that back to you. You will receive the blessings and the answers and the guidance that it is that you need, no matter what your storm or your situation is. But you have to be faithful. So, again, family, thank you for all of the support. Everybody who is tuned in, everybody who has supported me and my children, and just sent love and beautiful words. And for anybody out there struggling and going through something, just remember what I said. Keep your faith. Praise God in the middle of your storm. And just know that there is a reason, there's a message in it. And that message is for you. I can't always figure that out. The next person can't figure it out because it's your journey. It's your specific message. So it's for you to decipher. And for those of you who are battling health in any kind of trauma, first of all, control your energy, control your stress, control the dynamics you have with people. Anything and anybody that's not serving you or is bringing you down, remove it. Okay? If it's a situation that you cannot remove, control how you handle it. Okay? And family, we just got to do better. We got to hold ourselves accountable. We got to eat better. We got to sleep. We have to learn about the body. We've not been properly taught about the body. And it is our job to learn about our body or to find people who know about the body. Find books or research papers or read studies and articles about the different things that we are battling on an individual level to find those answers. And my prayers to anybody that's going through anything, just know that God is all around you. You just have to open your eyes and you have to open your spiritual eyes to see God in the middle of things, to see the signs. Sometimes God will speak through somebody and you'll miss it if you're not present. You'll miss it if you're focused on the destruction. If you're distracted, you will miss it. Okay? So remain present and start to notice God all around you. I notice God because I woke up today. I notice God because my children are in great health, and so am I. I notice it because we got food to eat, and we have a roof over our head, and we got clothes on our back. I notice it because just a few months ago, I didn't know where we were going to be living. I didn't know if I was going to be here. I did not know how or what I was going to put on my kids in the middle of winter. Okay? Because it was freezing out when we lost everything. But God kept showing up every day saying, I'm right here. Here goes some food. I'm right here. Here goes some clothes. I'm right here. Remember what you've learned about the body. You can heal yourself. Don't forget that. Don't allow yourself to be distracted by things that are irrelevant. Okay? Remember who you are. Okay, family? So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sitting here and taking this time with me. And I appreciate you all. If you enjoyed that, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and share. And family, I will see you back here again next time. Okay.